Hello, Forge fans. It's the Forge Audio Network. I'm Anthony Urciuoli, bringing you the focus on Forge. We'll be joined shortly by Mitchell Tierney from CanPL.ca. We'll talk Forge, of course. We'll talk CPL. And Forge FC coming off a very impressive win. 3-0 the final over Pacific FC at home. Borges set a goal. Pacia set a goal. Ashton Morgan, his first as a member of Forge FC. In his first season with the club. Forge now setting themselves up to be in complete control of their own destiny. Should they want to finish atop of the table, it's ultimately up to them. We've seen Forge at their best. We've seen that they can beat anybody. And with the way things are lining up with the games in hand and whatnot, Forge in control. And Forge looking to finish first. We can talk about, how important the standings are. The reality is you finish first, you guarantee home field throughout the postseason, which means you just have to win 2 straight home matches to win the CPL title. I mean, it's a huge advantage. So top spot, very important. Pacific still holding it down, but Forge within striking range and playing a few less games than Pacific has now. Forge will take on Halifax at Wanderers ground up next. The Wanderers looking for some revenge. Last time Forge played there, Halifax was handed their worst loss in franchise history. That was a 3-0 loss. And that really kind of started steering things in a better direction for Forge. There was that terrible match against CF Montreal, which I maintain, and I will stick with this until something shows me otherwise. But that match against CF Montreal, the embarrassment that Forge felt, head coach Bobby Smirniot has called it the worst half of football since Forge has been a club. That's 3.5 years now, and it did something. It awoken something, a beast inside of Forge, if you will, a dragon, I guess would be more fitting, and it righted the ship, at least for now. But I feel pretty good. As a Forge fan, you should feel pretty good. I know the club feels pretty good about how this season is shaping up now. Speaking of Borges, we're going to bring Mitchell Tierney in a moment, but before we get there, Borges is now, speaking of being in position to take over top spot, Borges has 5 goals. He's one off the league lead, and he's played less matches than Alejandro Diaz has for Pacific, who is currently in the lead. He has 6, Borges has 5, but Borges with plenty of opportunity to make up ground, and he has been absolutely on fire. And I was able to speak to him this week.
Even though I'm the one getting the goals, I think a lot of it also has to do with the team, how we've been playing. You can see the goals that I've been scoring, even if it's a good finish or anything like that. I think it goes to show that we're executing what the game plan is, right? So for me, it's just understanding my role on what I play. When I get on the field and if the ball comes to me and I just have to execute. I think that's the biggest thing. It's execution.
Through the combination of injuries and different kinds of health issues through that some players are experiencing, combined with the international duty that a few players are on right now, Forge will have some spots to be filled by guys that maybe aren't used to playing as many minutes, some younger players. They're going to get an incredible opportunity coming up here, because they will have to fill in some spots and play some bigger roles. And the club is confident in them. Coach is confident in them. And one of those guys that has already played meaningful minutes this season and will likely be counted on to do so this week and down the road as well is Noah Jensen, who's been an incredible addition for Forge FC. A guy that looks a lot like Kyle Becker in terms of, I don't mean appearance-wise, but in the way he plays, his leadership. He's been a captain before. And I was able to speak to Jensen this week and talk about that bigger role that he's expected to take on now.
Yeah, I think we all do. Everyone on the bench knows that there's a role for us to play in the game, and I think that's what you've kind of seen the last 2-3 games is it's taken everyone, and we know that we need good team performances to get these wins, and I think everyone's done a really good job to stay on the same page, and you can see that in the results for sure.
Yeah, even the fact that you can, we talk about chemistry and cohesion, and the fact that even if you're not playing a ton of minutes, the chemistry is still there. Is that built through training? Is it just through rapport with the guys?
Yeah, we have an excellent group. The older guys do a great job of integrating all of us on a daily basis in training, and I think the training sessions that we have are really set up to make sure that all 18 guys know exactly their roles and what they may have to do every weekend. And so regardless who's playing, we know what the job is and what has to get done.
All right, you heard from Tristan Borges, you heard from Noah Jensen. Now let's hear from Mitchell Tierney from CanPL.ca. I'm looking at I took a peek at the standings today in the CPL. It's been a fun year. I mean, early in the year we talked about parity, but it it's no one. I mean, a few teams have kind of separated themselves, but the top half of the standings, it's pretty cluttered. Teams like Forge still have games in hand. All in all, it's been an unpredictable season, and yeah, it's just been fun, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're starting to get to the phase in the season where we're starting to learn who the deep teams are, who the teams are who can kind of put in that extra performance, who can get the players off the bench when needed, that sort of thing. Early on in the season, it's Pacific. Clubs like York are coming well out of the gates, and then a couple injuries, and all of a sudden not looking so good. So, yeah, I think we're starting to get to that point in the year where the real cream is rising to the top in the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah, and I mean, just to kind of show the parity in this league, the top two teams right now, Pacific and Atletico, have minus goal differentials, which I mean, that's something you don't see very often after almost a dozen games into the season. So I mean, it goes to show you that week to week, you never really know what you're going to get. And there are a lot of teams, even Edmonton. I know they're still looking for their first win, but they've been a tough out, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any result that's thrown off the statistics in this league more than that 6-1 loss, Atletico Ottawa to Valor, because I think in the other games combined, like they've allowed more than a goal like once so far. So yeah, I mean, it's been one of those league seasons where there's ups and downs. Different clubs have shown good moments, and it's been I think we're starting to learn more and more the real situation of all clubs.
Yeah, and before we get to Forge, Atletico Ottawa's been a nice story this year. They're still, I mean, they're the newest team in the league, and it did not take them long to find their footing.
No, it didn't. Very impressed with new coach Carlos Gonzalez and everything he's been able to bring to the table. It's there's something special going on there. Again, we talk about depth. They're a side who, after last year, where they really struggled to have multiple options, that sort of thing. You bring in Balou Tabla, you bring in a number of these attacking players, and all of a sudden you're rolling veteran CanPL players like Carl Howarth, Brian Wright off the bench, and that's what it takes to win in this league. And yeah, they've been an excellent story, like you mentioned, so far this year.
Well, you mentioned attacking players, and early this season, the focus that was put on Forge was the fact that they were struggling, and the offense just it wasn't quite clicking, and everyone, what's wrong with Forge? What's wrong with Borges specifically? Well, Borges has been in fire lately. He's a goal off the. He has 5 goals and Diaz has 6, so he's one off the lead, and he has some games to make up as well. Borges, he's one of those guys that was relied on for offense, but Forge as a whole wasn't scoring much. And one thing I noticed was early in the year there were a lot of highlight reel type individual efforts from Forge. Hojab Rapport and Noah Jensen had a great goal from distance, and Chouanier, and these were goals from like 15 to 20 yards out. Since then, though, and as Forge has been winning more and the results have been there've been a lot more team goals, a lot more, 4 to 5 passes inside 20 yards, and then kind of clinical finishes. I don't think it's a coincidence that as the offense has gelled, the results have come for Forge.
No, certainly not. I mean, you talked about the negative goal differential of some of those teams at the top. Forge is one of those sides who's starting to really, build up their positive goal differential and some big offensive results recently. I think obviously it takes some time, especially when you're bringing in a guy like Taryn Campbell, who's new to the attack and takes some time to adjust. There's always going to be some growing pains, but everyone seems to be finding their role right now. And like you said, it's been a really good team effort. But within that team structure, a guy like Tristan Borges, who's been dominant in this league before, starting to really showcase himself again. And it's crazy how much for attacking players confidence makes all the difference. get a hat trick, you get a goal against Toronto FC, and all of a sudden, everything seems to be going in for Borges. And he's after a slow start, he's right back in there for the Golden Boot conversation, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and one of the, after that TFC match, and players were disappointed, but Bobby was very optimistic with not only the performance, but there was a sense that, okay, for the first time in this club's history, Forge can now focus solely on their domestic matches because there is no Canadian Championship, there is no CONCACAF. And you wonder, Bobby Smirniotis is one of these guys that, the league hasn't been around that long, but I think he cemented himself as one of the top minds in the league. Now he gets even more time to prepare week to week. And that's one of those storylines that kind of got lost in all this, that can Bobby be even more dangerous? Can Forge be even more dangerous with extra days to prepare for their opponents?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, there's even the mental side of things where Forge have almost been like a sleeping giant in this league where, we've seen Pacific, Ottawa, Cavalry grab all, York to some extent, grab all the headlines in recent weeks. Well, Forge, they've played less games than everyone else. They've maybe been a little under the radar. Sure, they haven't had some performances that maybe they'd like back. But I mean, you look at the points per game, you look at what they've done over the last little bit, like this is starting to look like the same old Forge of many years ago. And now, like you said, they have that opportunity where, there's no CONCACAF League, there's no Canadian Championship, there's no CONCACAF Champions League, there's no any of these many competitions. They can focus on the league, and a focused Forge team, as we all know, is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the amount of matches, but the amount of travel that they also have had to go through the last few years. So has there been a club this season that you think has maybe, I don't know if I want to say overperformed, but maybe has been a surprise and is maybe now starting to fade a little bit? Is there kind of been that team playing above their head this year, in your opinion?
Well, it's probably Pacific, and I mean, again, they were playing at a ridiculously great, performance to start the season. They were at such a good level, but yeah, I think it's pretty clear how much Manny Aparicio in particular means to that club, and any team this year or any team that suffers one injury and then looks that different is maybe not the top of the table club in any league. So I think we're starting to learn that about Pacific, and I still think they'll be up there towards the end of the year because they're very good, but they maybe aren't this all-conquering side that they looked to be through the first 6-7 match weeks of the Canadian Premier League year.
And that goes to your point when you talked about now this is where we see teams and their club's depth being tested, and I guess that goes to your point with Pacific.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a bit of an interesting month, this one, because you mentioned that the preparation of the time, there actually is less games for a lot of clubs, so they will be more ready for different fixtures. But it's going to be an interesting one, and like you said, so many injuries at this point in the year, the clubs are going to have to really start relying on their bench. Yeah,
it's weird that the season feels like it just started, but I'm already excited for the playoffs just because of how tight we know whoever finishes fifth, you get the feeling is going to just miss out by a tiebreaker or a point. It's that tight right now in the top half of the league. A team, it's hard not to feel for Edmonton. Just we know what they're dealing with. We know, whether it's the coaching staff has talked about it. They're dealing with different, they're hampered by things like budgets and youth and all that, but they just every week you're like, I think this is going to be it. I think they're going to pull it out, and then just that inexperience shows in the final few minutes. But I mean, it's weird because you look at the standings and you go, oh my gosh, Edmonton's like a doormat this year. But then you watch the games and they all seem close, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking. Again, I think your point is good about the experience of the side, right? Like that is something that really reigns true in this league. And again, when we're talking about things that have been difference maker in recent weeks, it's the experience of guys like Ollie Bassett in Ottawa, multiple players in Forge, Kyle Becker, that sort of thing, that are winning out and winning games for their side. Edmonton doesn't really have those types of players, and they'll get leads in games, and then won't know exactly what to do with it. And again, we saw that last night against Halifax where, they go up early and then they invite a lot of pressure and Halifax ultimately win out. So it'll happen for Edmonton this year. I'm confident of that. There's enough quality there and they've been scoring goals. I mean,
yeah,
that's the most difficult thing to do in soccer is score goals. So they've been doing that at a decent rate this year. It's just about keeping goals out of their own net. That will eventually obviously get them hopefully a win this year.
Yeah, I mean, Forge avoided near disaster, almost losing to Edmonton. They had to come back from two different deficits. But, I mean, Edmonton scored 3 goals in that match. Mm-hmm. So, again, to your point about Edmonton's ability to put the ball in net. What is going on with York? I mean, I think this is a club that when this league was announced, I think you expected some quality from York. And I think a lot of people from Hamilton especially expected that built-in kind of rivalry with York. And the rivalry's been just kind of dull. And it's because of the fact that York just hasn't been the quality club that, even Forge fans have hoped. You want that kind of built-in geographical rivalry, but for York's quality just kind of makes it so it's not a big deal.
I don't think it's quite as, maybe tough as that that paints the picture. Like, I do think, obviously they haven't scored in 5 games. That's the biggest thing here. They really, really haven't been able to score, and they're relying on a lot of young strikers, Lowell Wright, Osaze de Rosario, who maybe just haven't been in form. They've had a lot of chances. I mean, they're underperforming their expected goals like nobody's business. I think it's almost 6 now over the course of 10 games, which is absolutely wild in the Canadian Premier League or in any league to, underperform your expected goals and chances by that much. And I think they have the base of something here, though. They defensively are solid. They're tied with the league leading clean sheets. They barely ever concede anything. Last time Forge played them, it was a 1-0 result where they held Forge to a clean sheet, which again, barely ever happens. So I think there's a lot to build on for York. And I think if we're talking about sides maybe at the top that aren't, that might fall a little bit, York's one of those sides that I do expect to be really pushing that playoff bubble at the end of the year and perhaps even in it, just because, again, once they get healthy, once they continue to be able to score, like they have an identity here that is built for long-term success. All
right. Well, that'd be great. The more quality clubs in this league, the better for sure. Mitchell Tierney, I'm sure we can find your stuff on CanPL.ca. Anything you want to promote, plug?
We'll have a piece coming up later on today on all the guys who are going to the U20 from the Canadian Premier League. That includes, of course, York United, Lowell Wright, and 2 guys from Forge as well, Dino Bontis and Kwesi Poku. So, plenty on that, and just getting to know those players a little bit more, and the importance of having so many young Canadian Premier League players in the U20 side.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked to Noah Jensen about that this week, and it was weird because I said, I was asking him, I go, a few years ago, like this league didn't even exist. Like, where would you be playing right now? I mean, you just never know where your career could go, and the Canadian Premier League just opened so many doors wide open, and it also got some players a lot of exposure so that they are getting recognized by international clubs as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's 18, he's got 42 games of professional experience. Poku's played at the Azteca. Like those are things that Canadian youth national team players didn't have in their locker just a couple of years ago, as you mentioned. And now, because of the Canadian Premier League, they have that experience to draw on. And, I think we're going to see the dividends of that down in Honduras during this tournament.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. All right, Mitchell, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, that's going to do it for the Focus on Forge, but keep it locked onto the Forge Audio Network. A lot more content coming to you this week ahead of that match with Halifax on Sunday. You'll have the match day preview where we'll get more in depth and tee up that matchup at Wanderers Ground. We'll also give you the 3 keys to the match. What does Forge FC need to do to secure 3 points on the road? So keep it locked, keep checking. Thanks for listening. And as always, we will talk to you soon. We are the Forge, the mighty, mighty Forge. You just don't think you understand.
Anthony Urciuoli and Focus on Forge. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to the the Forge Audio Network.